As our Holy Days commemorations continue, today we remember the life and legacy of a man who was truly great. You could literally say the greatest of all time. Now, you all know I'm no sports fan, but I am a fan of any black person who stands on their own 2 feet. And few stood taller than Muhammad Ali. We remember him not just for what he did, but also what his life meant. He used that life to make a statement. Everybody claims that their life stands for something, but Ali's was one of the very few who nobody had to tell you what his life stood for. His story was the story of our people writ small. He came to prominence as Cassius Clay. In a way, that name was fitting. Cassius was also the name of a Roman who helped to mastermind the overthrow of the established power of his day. And this Cassius would be no less subversive. But unlike the Cassius of Rome, Ali would be taking on a far stronger empire. And worse, he would be doing it alone. Now, in the beginning, Muhammad Ali didn't have much controversy because he hadn't made much waves. There was, of course, the gold medal that he won in the 1960 Olympics, but it wasn't until he became a professional fighter and started speaking his mind that there came problems. Particularly when Muhammad Ali turned to Islam. But it was also more than that. Muhammad Ali had already had a taste of what it meant to have a platform, and now that the platform had grown with his foray into professional boxing, he decided he would speak his own mind on his own terms. After Ali had won the World Heavyweight Championship, the U.S. government decided that would be a good time to try to draft him into the Vietnam War. As everyone knows, Muhammad Ali famously refused, but he was no draft dodger. Rush Limbaugh, Donald Trump, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, these were draft dodgers. They used lies or their family connections to get out of going to Vietnam. Muhammad Ali, of course, had no such advantages, and he didn't need them. He had principle. He actually reported to the recruitment center in Houston where the induction into the Army was supposed to take place. But when they called his name, he wouldn't budge. They looked at him and warned him of the consequences if he didn't, but he refused to be intimidated. He didn't dodge the draft. He outright defied it. The U.S. government was using black soldiers largely as cannon fodder, and he refused to be part of that. And obviously Ali was being watched by a lot more people than just the military, because the very same day that he defied the draft, he was also stripped of the title. So they were watching him that day and they were just waiting to yank the title from him. In addition to having his title pulled, he was also convicted of violating the Selective Services Law. He appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, who unanimously overturned the ridiculous conviction. It had taken 3 years, but Muhammad Ali was finally able to regain his boxing license and get back in the ring in 1970. TBA once said something that every black person knows to be true. Prison has a way of breaking black people, particularly black men who don't truly know what they're fighting for. When these Negroes get out of prison, they usually can't wait to show how non-threatening they are. That's why white supremacy likes to use that tactic. When they put you in prison, you go in rebellious and you come out docile and submissive. While it's true that Muhammad Ali never went to prison, it's also true that they had done everything to him short of that. He had been without his title for 3 years. The enemy had been hoping that this would make him more compliant. After all, they had shown that they were fully prepared to take his livelihood away from him. The years that he spent without the title were lean years for him and his family. But rather than back down, Muhammad Ali doubled down. Not only had he not lost his fire in the belly, he was more determined than he had ever been. For his first match back, it was decided that Ali would have to face Jerry Quarry in his return match. Quarry was a big, burly Irishman from California. He was also 3 years younger than Ali. The thinking was if Quarry could knock out Ali, then it would be the perfect capstone to their efforts to humiliate him. It would certainly invalidate all of his black pride talk. And even if Quarry didn't win, if he could just manage to go the distance against Ali, well, that would at least show that Ali had lost a step. The same people who had been waiting to strip him of his title mere moments after he defied the draft were now watching and had already written the obituary to his career. This was to be a proxy fight, with Quarry as the establishment's champion and Ali as the champion of justice. But unlike Ali, Quarry hadn't spent 3 years fighting for his freedom in court, with the white media attacking him every minute of the day and his family in financial peril because of it. Unlike Quarry, Ali had been put through a psychological ringer between the loss of his income and nearly going to prison and being attacked relentlessly as some sort of traitor. But of course, this was the racist society simply doing more name-calling. They had been hurling slurs at Ali from day one, and if they weren't throwing insults at him over the draft, it would have been something else. Well, Ali knew the best way to shut the white supremacists up was to punch them in the mouth, which is exactly what he did. He beat the brakes off of Jerry Quarry, knocking him out in the 3rd round. When they stripped Ali of his title, they didn't expect him to suddenly decide to go join the army, but what they expected him to do was to come begging for his title back, or to otherwise try to make nice with them. He had a family to take care of, and not having the title was an enormous blow to his finances. But Ali didn't start buck dancing or sucking up. He didn't try to make nice with the powers that be because he meant every word that he had said, and his integrity wouldn't waver just because the enemy was attacking him. When he came back to boxing, he validated that he was exactly who and what he said he was, and it couldn't be denied, though the white media has certainly tried. Sylvester Stallone made Rocky in 1976. The story was in large part based on the Muhammad Ali-Chuck Wepner fight, which had taken place just the year before. Now, in Rocky, Stallone's character, quote-unquote, goes the distance and is still standing at the end of the movie. Well, that movie was and remains a feel-good exercise for the dominant society, because the reality was totally different. Wepner got washed, and the fight had to be stopped in the 15th round because Wepner could no longer stand due to the beating Ali had laid on him. In Rocky, they made it where both Stallone and Apollo Creed were all beaten up by the end of the movie. Both of them looked like they had been in hell, but in reality, Muhammad Ali looked like he hadn't been in a fight at all. Meanwhile, Wepner looked like a Mack truck had run him over several times. As their consolation prize, the white media had to push a blatant lie that Chuck Wepner had quote-unquote knocked Ali down in the 9th round when it was obvious that he hadn't. Wepner was desperate after the pummeling that Ali was putting on him, so in a panic, he used a dirty boxer's trick of stepping on Ali's foot and pushing him backwards. The boxing world knew what had happened. That's why nobody respected him afterwards. The white media certainly knew that's what happened, but they didn't want to have to admit that Wepner was a dirty fighter who pulled a fast one and still got knocked out. So instead, they were so desperate to claim that they had some sort of victory over Ali, even if it was something meaningless, they instead decided to push this ridiculous lie. To this day, Wepner still lies and falsely claims that he knocked Ali down. He tripped Ali. But the white media needs its fairy tales, so they still run with it. Ali's story is very much the story of black people in this country. If you're black, you actually have to achieve a victory in order to be considered a champion. You actually have to earn it. Nobody's going to shower you with praise or laud your never say die attitude or tell anyone that it didn't matter if you lost, you didn't quit, and that's all that mattered. If you're black, that doesn't happen. Talk about taking the bar and putting it on the ground, but when you've been privileged for so long, that's what has to happen. Chuck Wepner says the day that Ali beat him was the greatest day of his life. Kinda reminds me of those people who run around cherishing the Confederacy. You cherish losers because of how hard they fought to lose. I'm sure being in the presence of true greatness was the highlight of the talentless soup can Wepner's career. He should have been honored. Muhammad Ali was everything Wepner wasn't and could never be. And I'll bet he thinks of Ali often with pure envy. But Ali didn't think about Chuck Wepner at all. He never even spoke about him, unless some white media reporter brought his name up, and even then Ali didn't have much to say. He didn't consider whipping Wepner to be the greatest day of his life. Wepner was just another soup can to be knocked over. Meanwhile, Muhammad Ali went on from strength to strength, becoming a living legend. We remember Muhammad Ali. Meanwhile, the only people who remember Wepner are people from the dominant society who are engaged in wish fulfillment fantasies. Without Chuck Wepner, Muhammad Ali would still be remembered as the greatest boxer of all time. Then again, nobody remembers Wepner, even after he fought Muhammad Ali. That tells you everything you need to know about him, And keep in mind, this incident is what the Rocky movie was based on. Well, other people may need that, but we don't. We are a special people. Our heroes don't exist in comic books or sci-fi movies or white media wish fulfillment fantasies. Our heroes exist in the real world. Rocky Balboa doesn't exist, but Muhammad Ali actually did. Nobody remembers Chuck Wepner, and the few who do consider him a joke. Meanwhile, Ali is the greatest of all time. But of course, the wish fulfillment fantasy didn't end there. In a demonstration of how the dominant society is so psychologically warped in its envy of black people, Stallone's Rocky then goes on to basically pretend to have all the victories that Muhammad Ali and other black boxers had had, imitating so much of what Muhammad Ali had done, as if copying the man's poses and trying to do some lunk-headed version of Muhammad Ali's style also means that you could duplicate his greatness. But that's what this country has always done. It vilifies and hates black people and claims to be better than us, and then they turn right around and copy everything that we do. But while greatness is very difficult to copy, the greatest of all time is impossible. In the movies, Rocky wins one for democracy by taking on Russia's champion. But in the real world, it was Joe Louis who broke the Nazi-touted boxer Max Schmeling in the very first round of their second fight. The Lone Ranger didn't exist, but Bass Reeves did. The other major difference between our heroes and others is that our heroes actually have to win. Other folks simply have to be conscious, and the white media will give them the victory anyway. What the white media does is an old propaganda trick that the Europeans learned from the Romans, how to make your victories sound good and make your defeats sound even better. We don't have to resort to that. Muhammad Ali didn't start out with a complete sense of self, but he found it soon enough, and he understood something that so many of us still have not accepted. If you want to be liked, then just say yes to everyone. But if you want to be respected, then you better start learning to say no. I think that the capstone to Muhammad Ali's life was the fact that he never apologized to white power for anything, not for his words or his deeds. He never apologized for defying their draft. He didn't care who didn't like it. He never felt the need to sugarcoat what he said or to cushion the blow. America would simply have to get used to hearing the truth from a black man who they were too small and too weak to stop. Muhammad Ali stayed true to who he was. Most people don't because they can't. Most black people who encounter adversity from white power immediately knuckle under and start looking for some way to abandon ship, or to try to cop a plea and make nice in the hopes that white power will let up on them, and then they go looking for an excuse to justify what they did. But not Muhammad Ali. Just the fact that he never looked for or wanted the white media's approval made it where they had no real control over him. Most black folks, especially those in sports or entertainment, will rein themselves in, watch every word they say, and be meek as field mice, not just because they fear white power taking their money, but mostly because they fear white power not letting them hang around. They want to be liked by the racists who run these networks and newspapers and corporations and be allowed to stay in their presence. White power's control over most of these athletes, actors, and entertainers isn't even tied to the money. Just tied to you won't be allowed to associate with the in crowd anymore. And for them, that's a fate worse than death. And it's sufficient to get them buck dancing, scratching, and shuffling. But not Muhammad Ali. He knew that true power comes from within. He also knew that white power was desperate to make him compromise himself, and so long as he defied them and never sought their approval, then he had the power, because they desperately wanted him to say that he needed them, and he refused, because he didn't need them. His model of defiance was an inspiration to his people and a realization to the dominant society. He stood against an evil empire, the United States, and he stared the enemy down. He made it clear he wasn't selling out, he wasn't looking for a payoff, and everyone else saw this too. And in the process, Muhammad Ali made himself into the most feared of all defiant symbols, a winner who opposes the establishment. In the end, the same white media that had demonized and dogged him for so long, they were the ones who had to throw in the towel. When they failed to destroy their target, when he gains more respect than them, which ain't hard, They then had to pretend that, well, he won us over. That's what happened. He won us over. The praise from the white media has been totally false, but Ali knew it, and he didn't give them a pass. He was bigger than the puny bigots who tried to destroy him. He gave a blueprint on how you go from being a mere man to being a legend. He put on a masterclass in how to be unapologetically black. And he showed the world that which you cannot defeat, you have no choice but to accept.